on terror is now being fought on a new front. Do you know what that is? Airplanes. Do you know that 900 million of us fly on airplanes around the world each year? Well, you know what else is increasing? The number of so-called unruly passengers who are being tossed off airplanes, some of them for ridiculous reasons. Take this man who was just thrown off a Hawaiian Airlines plane this past week because he got angry when he asked for a blanket and they told him that it would cost $12. Well, I don't blame him. I'm sure you've been on a plane too where it's been freezing and you can't find a blanket, no less pay for one. Well, this man wanted to speak with the corporate office to complain. And they gave him the phone, and as he was complaining about having to pay for a blanket, he told the people on the other end of the line, "I'd like to take someone behind the woodshed for this." Well, that's kind of an old-fashioned phrase that means originally to take a naughty child out of the home and take them into the shed for a spanking. Big deal. But in today's heightened climate of fear, that was enough to frighten the airplane crew, including the pilot, not only the flight attendants, but it went all the way up to the pilot. And he apparently decided that the smartest thing to do was to make an unscheduled landing in LA. The plane was going from Las Vegas to Hawaii, so they stopped in LA. It cost them 4 hours of delay. They had to dump the fuel. Altogether, it was about $12,000 for a $12 blanket. Now, that's crazy. Now, also a PR nightmare they are paying for and will continue to pay for. So why are people that uptight? You know, it's gotten to this point. Now, I know what you're thinking, that even though he was kind of a nice-looking guy, you know, harmless-looking, I mean, who talks about a woodshed these days? So he seemed like a harmless little guy, but of course he could have been a terrorist because terrorists come in all shapes and sizes. Still, it seems to me this is quite an overreaction. Here's another example. There are countless examples of this. More and more, it's increasing that these crews are taking it into their own hands to decide to throw off unruly passengers, mainly because they're fearful for themselves. And let me read to you, before I tell you another story, another example of this, let me tell you about the Federal Aviation regulations about it. They say no person may assault, threaten, intimidate, or interfere with a crew member in the performance of the crew member's duties aboard an aircraft being operated. So, flight crews take this as carte blanche for them to remove any passenger and toss him off the plane. I mean, yes, maybe they did feel intimidated or threatened by this guy not wanting to pay $12 for a blanket, but really, you know, it's really taking things too far. Now, there's another recent example of a man being kicked off a United flight going from Chicago to Texas. As the passengers were boarding and settling into their seats, he looked at a Pakistani couple and he kept asking them, "That's not a bomb in your luggage, is it? That's not a bomb. Do you have a bomb in your luggage?" Well, obviously that's offensive, and the couple was offended, and the crew decided that before the plane got up in the air, they would toss him off. You know, what's interesting is in both of these examples, these people were put back on a plane to continue towards their destination, just not that plane. So if they were really that dangerous, you know, why did they let them get back on any plane? Another example, of course, there have been political fights, lots of political fights on planes before the election and even staying after the election. You may well have heard about this man, an American lawyer, on a plane that Ivanka Trump was on soon after the election with her husband and 3 children, and this man started yelling at her about being on a commercial flight, that she should be on, isn't your father running the country? You should be on a private jet. And it wasn't because he really cared about the safety of Ivanka. It was because he, you know, was obviously not a fan of hers or her family's. Then, of course, there have been more cases of Muslims who fit the stereotypical view of what a terrorist looks like being booted off planes more frequently. Now, after 9/11, the number of people, according to statistics, the number of people who were booted off planes in 1995. Now, of course, these statistics are only those that are reported, so they're not exact, but still. 1995, there were about 150 people booted off planes because of being, well, really incidents of unruly passengers. And then after 9/11, it doubled to 300. And now, then it went down a little bit again, and now it seems to be going on an upswing again, because in this past year, of course, there have been so many more terrorist attacks. So, why is there this bad behavior on planes? Well, the number one cause is fear. Fear amongst the passengers, and certainly fear amongst the cabin crews. Now, it's not totally unreasonable that people on planes would have more fears. Since 9/11 involved planes, there have been other terrorist attacks that have involved planes, and we're all cramped in like sardines into a very tiny space. And in general, even before 9/11, when people had fear of flying, it had to do with being afraid of your life not being in your hands. You were not in control of the plane, and it was way up in the sky. So, there's some reasonableness to this. But then what do people do to try to deal with their fears? They drink alcohol, which makes the situation worse. And also, over the years, there have been less and less comforts on planes. We used to get meals, we used to get blankets, we used to get all kinds of things as planes competed for our business. And now less and less conveniences and comforts are there, and whatever is there, you have to pay extra for. So, by feeling that we are not being taken care of, not being protected, that makes us more fearful. If they're not even going to give us a blanket, then how are they going to protect us from terrorists? So it's just a vicious cycle, and everyone gets more frightened, and it's a dangerous situation because because we are in this confined space and you can't just get off. And so everybody kind of needs to take it down a notch, including the flight crew, who have to be better trained to recognize a terrorist from a man talking about a woodshed.